Welcome back to Blacklit Memory. Tonight, we head into Alaska's quiet places, where the towns aren't on maps, the roads aren't on GPS, and the people aren't on record. These three stories weren't passed down, they were recovered. From melted tapes, from claims that should have been denied, from the kind of voices that don't expect to be believed. You'll hear from those who ran from one mistake and found a place that already knew their name. A diner where everyone's waiting, a town where you've already been mourned, and a chapel where your blood signs before you do. So before we begin, consider subscribing, leaving a comment, and letting us know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I always want to know where these stories end up and who's listening. Now zip your coat, keep the engine warm, and listen close. It happened 2 nights ago. I just told Mira it was over the phone, like a coward, and I guess I wasn't paying attention to the road. There was this blur, a figure crossing too fast in the rain. I hit the brakes, swerved, but the impact still came. Hard. When I climbed out, shaking, there was blood on the bumper. No movement in the ditch. No phone signal either. I panicked, got back in the truck and drove until my knuckles bled, gripping the wheel. I told myself they were dead. I told myself I had no choice. I never planned to stop. Not in a place like that. But when the engine coughed and spat black smoke halfway through the turnoff, and the dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree, I knew the truck wouldn't last another mile. I coasted onto the icy shoulder and sat there for a long minute, gripping the wheel with fingers gone white. It was late September. The Alaskan sky had started to spit snow, light flakes like dust against the windshield. I had crossed the Yukon River 2 hours earlier and hadn't seen another car since. No cell service, no gas station, no mile markers, just forest on both sides and silence so deep it pressed against my ears. I wasn't supposed to be here. The plan was to head north, past the smaller towns, where no one would know my face. After what happened back in Eugene, I couldn't afford to be recognized. Not by the cops. Not by anyone who still watched the news. I stuffed a few things into my backpack. Cash, canned food, the printed map I kept for emergencies. The truck groaned as I stepped away, like it resented being left behind. I didn't look back. The map showed a place called Harrow's Pass, about 6 miles east. I'd never heard of it. The name was handwritten, almost as an afterthought, in the margin of an old hunting map I bought from a pawn shop. It was either that or freeze to death by the roadside. The trail wasn't marked, just a narrow line through spruce trees, barely wide enough for one person. Snow gathered fast. It settled in my boots, stung my face, found its way through the seams of my jacket. I moved fast to stay warm, but the cold still found me. Halfway there, I saw it, a house off to the side, dark and shuttered. Something about it made me stop. Chalk writing covered the front door. A single X with the words cleared below it. I kept moving, heart pounding harder than the cold deserved. By the time I reached Harrow's Pass, I couldn't feel my fingertips. The town was small, maybe 30 buildings tucked close together against the slope of the valley. Smoke curled from chimneys. Lights burned warm behind frosted glass. A red post office. A diner. A hardware store. All the things a town needs. And not a single sound. The first person I saw was a woman sweeping the porch outside the diner. She looked up and smiled like she'd been expecting me. "You poor thing," she said. "Come in. Come in before your nose falls off. Things are new." The inside was warm. Too warm. Smelled like beef stew and cinnamon. People sat at tables. All older. All looking at me with the same calm smile. Like I was the last guest to arrive at some strange family gathering. Someone brought me a towel. Someone else brought soup. I told them my truck had broken down, that I'd been hiking. I didn't mention Oregon. I didn't mention what I was running from. They didn't ask. A man named Raymond said he could tow my truck in the morning. "You'll stay the night?" "Of course," he said. "We've got a room ready at the inn." When I asked how he knew I'd need a room, he just smiled and tapped the side of his nose. Small towns are good at knowing things. Another chance. The inn stood on the edge of the town, next to a frozen creek. My room was upstairs, cozy, with a handmade quilt and a space heater humming low. On the nightstand, someone had left a mug of tea and a photograph. It showed a man who looked almost exactly like me, standing beside a pickup. The truck was the same make and model as mine. I stared at that photo for a long time, flipped it over. No writing. I put it back where I found it and sat down on the edge of the bed. The tea had gone cold. That night, I heard someone walking in the hallway. Slow, measured steps, back and forth. Then, stopping outside my door. I held my breath, waiting for a knock that never came. Eventually, the footsteps faded. The next morning, I went for a walk before anyone else was up, past a row of houses. One had its curtains drawn tight, but I saw the outline of someone standing there, motionless, just behind the glass, watching. In the back lot behind the diner, I found an old delivery truck half buried in snow. Its rear doors were chained shut. Beside it, an empty dog bowl. No tracks. I returned to town just as Raymond pulled in with my truck. He said the damage was worse than expected. Cracked timing belt, warped cylinder, maybe a week to fix, depending on parts. His tone was casual, but his eyes never quite met mine. I nodded, thanked him, tried to smile. Inside, my chest was tightening. Something was wrong here. And the worst part was, I couldn't tell if they knew who I really was or if they were hiding something even darker. Then, that afternoon, I found the hatch. A rusted steel door buried behind a row of trash bins beside the hardware store. It wasn't locked. I pulled it open. A short ladder led down into the dark. The air that came out was cold, too cold, and carried the faint scent of bleach and something sweeter, something that reminded me of rot. I descended, slowly, step by step. The ladder groaned under my weight. The room below was concrete. Bare bulbs hung from wires. On one wall, Polaroid photos. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Men, women, children. Some smiling, some terrified. In the center of the room sat an old VHS player, a tape already inside. I pressed play. The screen flickered. Snow, then a man, tied to a chair. His eyes were swollen shut. A voice, off-screen, said calmly, "Tell us where you're from. It's the last time we'll ask." There, providing and to explain by working into the bread, with they whited. I hit stop. Then I heard it. A footstep above, right at the hatch. Then another. They knew I was down here. I didn't move. I stayed crouched beside the old tape player, breathing through my nose, heart hammering against my ribs. The footsteps above were slow, deliberate. Whoever it was had weight, not the hurried steps of someone discovering something by accident. These were the steps of someone checking, someone who already knew. I flicked off the power strip, plunging the room into darkness. My eyes took a second to adjust. Faint light seeped through the hatch above, just enough to cast the edge of the ladder in shadow. I pressed myself into the corner, behind a stack of crates that smelled like old rust and vinegar. The hatch creaked open. Cold air rushed in. A beam of light swept across the room once. Then again, I saw boots on the top rung. Then a voice, quiet and calm. "Ethan, if you down there." It was Raymond. I didn't answer. He waited. A full minute passed. Then he sighed, muttered something under his breath, and closed the hatch. I stayed in that basement another hour, listening. No more footsteps, no voices. Eventually, I climbed back up, slow and careful, and slipped out the side alley without being seen. Back in my room, I packed my bag. I didn't care about the truck anymore. I had to get out. I planned to wait until nightfall, then slip out through the creek bed, follow it east until I hit the main road. Maybe hitch a ride if I was lucky. At dinner, I pretended everything was fine, smiled when they smiled, ate what they gave me. Beef stew again. The meat was too soft. I chewed slowly, watching their eyes as they watched mine. Sarah, the diner owner, sat down across from me. "You getting comfortable yet?" she asked, tilting her head like a curious bird. "Very," I said. "Town's quiet, peaceful. There is no to be a action of there. He have, not no to Dallin." She nodded. "We like it that way. People come here to disappear." Or, I think that was supposed to be comforting. It wasn't. That night, I waited until the lights dimmed. Then I slipped out the window, landing in the snow with barely a sound. I moved fast, sticking to shadows, following the frozen creek past the edge of town. I had barely made it 100 feet before I saw the first figure, standing near the tree line, then another, then a third, all holding flashlights, all pointed toward me. I bolted. My boots hit snow, slipped on rocks. Breath tore from my lungs in sharp bursts. Flashlights danced behind me, voices shouting, too far to hear clearly but too close to ignore. I duck under a fallen log, crawl through the brush. My backpack catches on a root and tears. But I keep going, keep pushing. A gunshot cracks the air. I flinch. The bark near my shoulder explodes in splinters. My body reacts before my brain does. I change direction, veer hard to the left, down a slope I hadn't seen until it was too late. I tumble. Snow blinds me. Rocks cut my hands. I hit bottom hard and don't move for several seconds. Just lie there, listening. The forest is too quiet. I rise slowly, every muscle screaming. There is a light ahead, dim, flickering. I limp toward it. It's a shed, wooden, half-rotted. I slip inside and bolt the door. Inside, it smells like gasoline and animal feed. And something else. In the corner, there's a pile of boxes. Underneath them, a tarp. I pull it back. A body. Fresh. Face frozen in shock. A man I had seen at dinner 2 nights ago. His name tag still pinned crooked to his shirt. I don't have time to think. Outside, footsteps crunch in the snow. A voice whispers, "Check the shed." I watnend. I look around. No windows. One door. I grab the only thing I can find. A rusted crowbar. The door handle turns. I press against the far wall. Grip the crowbar tighter. The door creaks open. A flashlight beam slices through the dark. It lands on the tarp, then rises. Raymond steps inside. He sees me. I swing. The crowbar connects with his shoulder. He grunts, stumbles back. I shove past him, out into the snow, running blind. Shouts rise behind me. More lights. More footsteps. I see the diner ahead, the gas pump beside it, and the canister of propane near the back wall. I don't think. I act. I grab the propane, knock over the pump, fumble with my lighter. The spark catches. I run. The explosion flattens me. Heat tears across my back. I keep crawling. Keep going. Through fire and smoke and snow and screams. Everything is chaos. I don't stop until I'm miles out. Until the sky turns from black to gray and a snowplow appears on the road ahead. They take me in. Call the state troopers. Later, when I tell them everything, they nod politely. Say they'll check it out. Say Harrow's Pass hasn't been on the map in years. When they go looking, there's nothing there. No diner. No inn. Just burnt wood and ash. No bodies. No records. No proof. But I stay, waiting at the precinct. There's something else I need to say. Something I should have said 2 nights ago. So, I tell them about the accident, about the curve in the road, the figure in the rain, the silence after impact, about how I ran because I thought I'd killed someone, because I thought there was no going back. They exchange glances. Then one of the troopers steps out to make a call. I sit there, barely breathing, waiting for the cuffs. But it's not what I expect. The man I hit survived. A concussion, a fractured wrist. He'd crawled up to the road, flagged down a trucker 20 minutes after I left. He told them I panicked, that I ran. They charged me for it. Leaving the scene of an accident, 6 months jail time, a fine, mandatory restitution. I don't fight it. I serve my time, pay what I owe. When I get out, I head south, Arizona, far from snow, far from forests. But I still check behind every door, still keep a flashlight by the bed. And when someone smiles too widely, offers help too quickly, I remember the tape, the photo, the taste of beef stew that lingered too long. I know I ran from one crime straight into another, but I survived. And I know Harrow's Pass wasn't the only place like that. It was just the first one I found. My name is Tommy Reeves. I used to be a field investigator for Ridgeway Assurance, a mid-tier insurance company that dealt with high-risk policies in remote areas. Most of my work involved verifying claims that local agents couldn't reach in time, especially during winter months. I had been in the job for 8 years, long enough to learn when someone was faking a fire or staging a disappearance. In early February, I was assigned to investigate a cluster of questionable life insurance payouts in northern Alaska. They all shared one thing in common. The last known address listed for the deceased was a town called Dead Horse. That alone raised flags. Dead Horse was supposed to be a logistical ghost town. No active population. No services. Nothing but ice roads and rusting steel. I flew into Fairbanks, then took a supply convoy headed north. The last 100 miles had to be done by snowmobile. The man who drove me out there said no one had been to Dead Horse in over a year. But when we arrived, lights were on. The town wasn't dead. It was just sleeping. The place had power, heat, and even a functioning general store. There was a single diner, a sheriff's office, and what looked like a converted dormitory building labeled lodging. But there were no kids, no noise, just a handful of men and women in thick jackets who stared too long and spoke too little. I checked into the lodging facility under a fabricated name. Standard procedure. At dinner, I asked casual questions about the town. Most people claimed they were just passing through, but no one ever left. And every face I saw that first night looked like they had memorized an answer in advance. The next morning, I visited the sheriff's office. The man who greeted me was Sheriff Rourke. Gray stubble, thick build, no badge visible. He kept his eyes on my ID for too long, then smiled without warmth and said, "Lot of folks die out here, Mr. Reeves. Cold's a real killer." This couldn't act straight. I tried to probe deeper, ask about death certificates, next of kin, any paperwork. He shrugged and pointed toward the wind outside. Most times we just send the body south and let Juneau deal with the rest. His answers were vague, deliberately so. By day 3, I had found 4 burned structures on the outskirts of town. All had been written off in past claims as accidental. One still smelled of melted plastic and fuel. The timelines didn't add up. The claim dates didn't match weather records I pulled from NOAA. Someone had been staging incidents to match the payout windows. That night, I overheard a conversation between 2 men at the diner. I was sitting in the back booth, pretending to read. One of them said, "Next one's due on the 7th. Truck's coming up the ice road." The other man replied, "Already picked the name." They both laughed. It was the kind of laughter that stays in your bones. I waited until midnight. Then I left my room with gloves on and my ID hidden. I had seen a side door to the sheriff's office that never fully latched. The wind howled loud enough to mask my steps. Inside, it was warmer than expected, and dead silent. I moved past a trophy wall, taxidermy, old photos, a flag. There was a locked drawer under the main desk, but the filing cabinet to the left was slightly open. Inside were dozens of insurance claims, all filed under different names, all approved, and every single one was signed off by the same two people, Sheriff Rourke and a notary named Eliza Holloway. I kept flipping until I found something that made my blood run cold. A claim form dated February 3rd. The policyholder, Thomas Reeves. Cause of death, exposure. Status, approved. I wasn't supposed to survive this trip. I was the next name on the list. Then I heard a door creak open behind me. I froze. My hand was still inside the filing cabinet. Footsteps creaked across the wooden floor. I turned slowly and saw Sheriff Rourke standing in the doorway. His right hand was inside his coat. "I figured you weren't here for the view," he said. His eyes dropped to the papers in my hand. "You just couldn't leave well enough alone, could you?" I took a step back. He stepped forward. Then he moved fast. Too fast for his size. He lunged across the room and shoved me into the cabinet. My ribs slammed into the steel, and the breath left my chest. I swung wildly with the flashlight in my hand. It cracked against his forehead. Splitting skin. Blood poured down the side of his face. But he didn't fall. He grabbed my collar and tried to drag me toward the desk. I twisted, drove my knee into his gut, and both of us tumbled to the floor. We rolled through chairs, knocking over a lamp. Sparks flew when the bulb shattered. I don't remember how I got the upper hand, only that I was suddenly outside. My boots slipped across the icy steps as I ran. I heard him shouting behind me, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I sprinted across the main road and into the forest. Branches whipped my face. I ran until the cold burned my lungs. Then I dropped behind a snowbank and pulled out my emergency radio. I could barely steady my hand to switch it on. "This is Ridgeway Field, Agent 441, I whispered. "Compromised. Multiple fraudulent claims. Local involvement. Requesting emergency extraction." Repeat. "Emergency extraction. But this is Dacian." No answer. Only static. I repeated the message until the batteries died. I couldn't risk returning to the lodging. They would check there first. So I circled around the ridge and followed a narrow path into the woods. That was when I saw it, set back against the trees. Barely visible beneath the snow and fog, stood a chapel. It was old. Sagging roof, warped wood, a steeple bent like a broken finger. But there was shelter. I pushed open the crooked door and stepped inside. The inside was colder than outside. Pews rotted through. Wind slipped through broken panes. At the altar sat a stack of papers, warped by water. I moved closer. Insurance forms. Stamped. Signed. Names I didn't recognize. Then I saw my own. Thomas Reeves. Policy marked paid. Date of death, 3 days from now. The signature matched mine, but I had never touched that paper. My mouth went dry. I stepped back. The door slammed shut behind me. I spun. Nothing there. Just darkness pressing in. The windows were too high to reach. I moved to the far corner behind the pulpit and crouched, trying to stay hidden. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. My breathing slowed. I thought I had outrun it. That I would wait for the chopper. That I would live. Then the sound of boots echoed on the chapel floor. I held my breath. Multiple sets. Slow. Deliberate. I peeked through a crack between crates and pews. Figures moved in from the shadows. No faces visible. Just silhouettes. One of them wore a sheriff's coat. They didn't speak. They fanned out. Searching. I flicked off my headlamp and drew back further. One of them passed within a foot of me. I could smell pine tar and something metallic. My heart slammed against my ribs. I glanced at the door. Too far. The windows. Too high. There was no way out. And in that moment I knew this was it. There would be no running. No last-second rescue. Just the cold and the shadows and the paper with my name. My chest tightened. My fingers went numb. A hand shot over the pew and grabbed my coat. Another closed on my arm. I barely struggled as they pulled me out from the shadows, dragging me down the aisle toward the front of the chapel, toward the altar. It wasn't an altar anymore. Not really. Just a slab of stone, smeared with something dark and dried. On it lay a sheet of paper, yellowed and curled. My name already written at the top. Below it, the words, date of termination, followed by today's date. A small stone bowl sat beside the paper. Inside was a thick black liquid. A knife made of carved bone lay next to it, crusted with old rust or blood. They forced me to kneel. One of the robed figures stepped forward. He took the bone knife and pressed the tip to my finger. I flinched as it cut. A drop of blood fell onto the parchment. I stared at it, my blood soaking into the paper beside my name. Then I moved. Something in me snapped loose. Not panic, not rage, but a raw, stubborn need to live. A spark that refused to die. I slammed my shoulder backward into the figure behind me. He staggered. I twisted to the side and knocked the altar with my knee. The stone bowl toppled. Its contents spilled across the paper and onto the floor. The knife clattered against the tile. I lunged for it. Another figure grabbed my coat, but I spun, slicing through the rope around my wrists with the edge of the blade. I didn't stop. I charged through them, barreling past a figure in the sheriff's coat, and burst through the side door of the chapel into the night. Snow hit my face, cold and blinding. But then came the sound, a low thump in the sky. Rotor blades. I looked up. A searchlight swept across the trees. The helicopter hovered above the clearing, blowing snow in every direction. I waved both arms, stumbling toward the light. I didn't look back, not until I was airborne. As the harness lifted me above the treetops, I turned, one last time. Down below, standing in the snow outside the chapel, were all the figures, silent, watching, their heads tilted back, as if waiting for someone else. When I woke up, I was in a hospital in Anchorage. Warm, fed, safe. A man in a dark suit stood by the window. He said he was with the Department of Insurance Oversight. Asked me for everything I had. I told him the whole thing. They sent investigators. The town was gone. No diner. No sheriff's office. No bodies. Just scorched wood and ash. No one could confirm anything I saw. There were no death records. No active policies. No building permits. I was the only documented visitor to Dead Horse in the last 18 months. They called it hypothermic psychosis. Said I must have imagined it all. But I had the bruises, the cracked rib, and the scar above my left eye from where Rourke hit me with a lamp. None of that was imagined. A week later, I received a voicemail from a number with no caller ID. Just a whisper. It's not over. You're already signed. Then silence. I didn't choose the town because it looked safe. I chose it because it didn't show up on any of the maps I checked. After Mason, after the bruises and the miscarriage, I needed to vanish somewhere no one would ever think to look. No records. No digital trail. Just a name whispered once in a hospital corridor by a man who couldn't feel his fingers anymore. He told me about a place up north where people like me could disappear. Said they didn't care who you were, just whether you brought trouble. I waited until the dead of winter, sold what little I had, bought a truck with cash, and drove until the road turned white and the radio went silent. The town had no sign, no welcome, no speed limit, no flags. Just a cluster of wooden buildings hunched together like they were hiding from the wind. Smoke curled from 3 chimneys. The snow was knee-deep when I pulled in. My fingers had gone numb on the wheel. A man stepped out before I even killed the engine. Heavy coat, calm face, no badge, no clipboard. "You made it just in time," he said. "Storm's coming in fast." He didn't ask my name. He brought me to a small lodge behind the fuel pump. It smelled faintly of old pine and burnt coffee. The room was warm, bed already made. A black canvas coat hung by the door. Same color, same cut. Even the cuff button missing from the left sleeve. I had one just like it. Threw it away the night I lost the baby. I didn't say anything. I didn't ask. I just sat down on the edge of the bed, and the man nodded like we had finished a conversation. That night, a woman brought me soup in a clay bowl. "Good for rebuilding blood," she said softly, especially after a heavy loss. Her voice was gentle, but her eyes didn't blink. No one should have known that. I hadn't told anyone. The next morning, the snow was piled up to the windows, but the power still worked. I walked the length of the town. 10 buildings, maybe 12. A supply shack, a bar, a long-closed school. Everything took cash. No one asked where I came from. At the store, the boy behind the counter rang up my things without a word, then said, "You have blood, don't you?" Like it was nothing, like it was already written somewhere. I didn't answer. I just took my bag and left. Later that day, I saw a clipboard left behind the counter. Curiosity got the better of me. One page was a printout for a prescription refill. The name jumped out. Jeremy Collins. I remembered him. Portland. Went missing last spring. His sister was on the news. That night I wrote down everything. Every face. Every phrase. The smell of the soup. The exact weight of the jacket. I kept records. It was an old habit from nursing, and now it felt like the only thing keeping me tethered. Then there was the girl by the church ruins. Thin, pale, barely out of her teens. She looked at me like she wanted to speak but couldn't. As I passed, she whispered, "Don't stay here alone too long." Her voice cracked on the last word. A moment later, a woman stepped out of a nearby house and pulled her inside. No yelling, no fight, just quiet hands. That night I pushed the dresser in front of my door and kept my boots on. I didn't know what this place was. Not yet. But it wasn't safe. And I had to know why. So when the town fell quiet and the wind picked up, I stepped out into the dark and headed toward the burned church. I didn't know what I'd find down there, but I knew it wouldn't be good. I moved fast across the square, my boots sinking deep into the new snow. The chapel ruins loomed like a dark tooth against the pale sky. No one was outside, only the sound of wind scraping the windows. I told myself I would just look for a few minutes, take notes, and leave before anyone noticed. The back door of the chapel hung crooked, wood blackened from an old fire. I pulled it open and slipped inside. The air was colder here, sharp and metallic. I found the stairwell in the far corner, hidden behind a warped hymn board. The steps disappeared into a dark cellar below. I went down slowly. My flashlight beam wobbled over the walls. Metal shelves lined one side of the room, stacked with binders and sealed envelopes. I opened one at random and found medical charts, names, and blood types. At first, it looked like hospital records. Then I saw organ viability written at the top of every page. I flipped through 3 more folders. Each matched a missing person poster I remembered from the news. Dates, surgical notes, tissue compatibility. All neat, all recent. My breath caught. This wasn't just storage. It was inventory. A noise made me freeze. My elbow knocked into a cabinet. Papers slid to the floor. I bent to grab them, and my shoulder brushed something cold. I turned and saw the freezers. 4 of them, humming faintly. My stomach dropped. I opened one. Inside lay a man, skin pale, belly taped with surgical strips. The smell of antiseptic burned my nose. I stepped back, nearly tripping over a chair. My hands shook so hard the flashlight flickered. Footsteps. I kill the light and crouch behind the desk. The stairs creak. A shape moves into the room. It is the man who brought me to the inn, his boots leaving dark prints across the floor. "You shouldn't be here," he says. Voice low. I rise before I can think. He lunges. His hands close around my arm. We fight. I twist, slam the flashlight into his face. He grunts but does not let go. We crash into the binders, papers raining down like snow. He reaches for my throat and I grab the nearest thing, a metal tray, and smash it against his shoulder. He stumbles, but another shadow appears at the top of the stairs. Then another. More footsteps. I break free and run. The air is knives in my lungs. I slam up the stairs, through the broken chapel door, into the blizzard. Shouts follow me. Lights flare behind me. Snowmobiles roar to life. I run into the woods, branches clawing at my face. My ribs ache from the fight, but I keep going. A shot cracks. Snow explodes near my feet. Someone yells my name. I never gave it to them. A machine closes in from the right. Engine growling. Another from the left. They are circling. I see a dark gap between two rocks and throw myself toward it. I fall hard, pain ripping through my chest. My vision blurs. I press my back to the stone, hiding as the engines idle above. My breath comes in white bursts. The file I grabbed from the cellar crumples in my fist. I can hear them talking, calm and steady. Check at first light. His acting sides. Hours pass like minutes. I light a scrap of paper to keep from freezing. Flames lick the edge of the donor list. It curls, blackens, vanishes. Only one page survives, trapped under my boot. When I wake, it is to voices above me. Red parkas, Canadian flags on the sleeves. Rescue, or something close to it. They pull me up, wrap me in a blanket. I tell them everything. The hatches, the bodies, the records. But when they follow me back, there is nothing. The chapel is a heap of wet ash. The freezer's gone. The binder's gone. Even the snowmobile tracks erased by wind. I give them the last page. The officer takes it but says nothing. Weeks pass and no one calls. Afterward, I crossed into Canada and kept going until the road ran out. Found a logging town with no names, no questions. I stayed quiet, took night shifts, told myself it was safe. But certain things pulled me back. The smell of pine smoke, a woman who guessed my coffee order without asking, a jacket in the thrift shop, same color, same missing cuff button. I never asked, never lingered, just kept walking. Some nights, I wonder if I really got away, or if I just walked into a different version of the same place. And I know now, that town wasn't unique. There are others, hidden, quiet, patient, waiting for someone like me to come looking for peace.